Leave now.
Hey guys, this is Danny Boy. So, I want to talk about builds. I want to talk about some leveling builds, some builds that I enjoy using throughout my experience
Run.
in normal, nightmare, and hell. I used for a large portion of nightmare and late normal Plague of Toads. I used Plague of Toads combined with Reign of Toads in a build that I like to refer to as the Rainman build. And the Rainman build essentially uses channeled abilities to do a lot of damage over time quite quickly, but they're very mana hungry. So you want to overcome the mana intensity to allow you to channel as long as you need to kill your foes. Now obviously one way you can do that is to simply get more mana regen. For example, on my dagger, I have, in addition to its other stats, increased mana regeneration by 10 per second. And just 10 per second does really make a tremendous difference. That's one thing you can do, and it makes the build much more sustainable. But until you get gear that has that, I recommend using a secondary ability that allows you to regenerate mana. So to start, you could use Spine Dart, Poison Dart, Spine Dart. To get mana back, another option would be Widowmaker Spiders, which personally I think is better than Spine Dart once you unlock it, because Spine Dart you spend a lot of time standing perfectly still, whereas with Widowmaker Spiders you can just throw a bunch of them, have them attack a bunch of enemies, and they're still giving you back mana even while you're moving around, because they continue to attack. So that's my personal favorite. Very late game, you can use Haunt and Draining Spirit. Now, Haunt does very good damage, but it does cost a lot of mana, so to just get a decent return on the cast, I would highly recommend you use Rush of Essence along with Haunt to dramatically reduce its mana cost essentially by having it refund 30%. Otherwise, I would recommend using Spiritual Attunement, maximum mana increase by 20% and regenerate 1% of your maximum mana, and or Blood Ritual, which spends 15% of mana cost with life, and you regenerate 1% of your maximum life per second. Now, the 15% of mana cost paid with life is significant in terms of mana reduction, but I've never really noticed it actually impacting my health. The 1% health really does make up for it pretty substantially. I've never really... if you don't have a lot of life, it can be an issue when you are channeling something like Plague of Toads, but it never really was a problem for me. Now, I have tested both of these passives to see exactly how comparable they are, and Spiritual Attunement essentially allowed me to get one less cast of, say, zombie bears off. Say I could get 7 casts or 6 or 7 casts with Spiritual Attunement versus 8 with Blood Ritual. However, Spiritual Attunement, say it takes me to regenerate from 0 my mana without any plus to mana mods on my gear, 0 to max, like 50 seconds or what have you, with Spiritual, or rather with Blood Ritual. Spiritual Attunement tended to shave off about 10 seconds from that. So you can get one more cast in the short term with Blood Ritual, whereas you will generate mana much faster with Spiritual Attunement. And again, there's nothing that says you can't use both of these abilities together. However, with Plague of Toads, that's probably not really needed. More so useful with something very mana intensive like zombie bears or, of course, Firebats. And I'll get into that a bit later. But what I would recommend for a leveling build for just early game is to absolutely use Jungle Fortitude. Honestly, I use Jungle Fortitude through the vast majority of the game. 20% damage reduction is a tremendous amount of armor. It is, let's see, I have 2,996 armor with 50% damage reduction. It's easily equivalent to, like, I don't know, 1,000 armor. It's really, really substantial. Very, very powerful. I recommend using Jungle Fortitude throughout the vast majority of the game. Spiritual Attunement is also a very good idea when combined with Plague of Toads. Now, the third option is kind of up in the air. Gruesome Feast can be helpful. The 10% intelligence buff, stacking up to 5 times, can be really, really powerful with health globes. But... And just picking up obviously picking up health globes to return a good chunk of your mana. Bad Medicine can be useful, though, to give you further damage reduction. Be really powerful. If you like using pets, Zombie Handler, giving you another zombie dog and improving your gargantuan can be really nice. Once you reach a certain break point where you're no longer really impacted by the 30% increase on mana costs, I highly recommend Pierce the Veil. Another 20% damage is extremely substantial, so once you get enough mana regen and have enough mana that you're really not phased by the 30% increase, I highly recommend Pierce the Veil. Now, beyond that, I don't really recommend Fetish Sycophants because it seems like it doesn't really proc per tick of a channel. I mean, maybe it does, but it seemed to proc more when I was just spamming free abilities. Spirit Vessel, I would definitely recommend on boss fights. Even throughout the game, especially on Hell and Inferno, can be always useful. Just shaving off 2 seconds on your Spirit Walk alone is incredibly useful, along with the cheat death mechanic that it saves you once every 90 seconds is very nice. Rush of Essence I would not recommend unless you are using Haunt as your secondary ability to return mana, or just you want to use Haunt to multi-dot and provide some supplemental damage if you can't just sit and channel because enemies are moving very quickly. Vision Quest is a very interesting option and is an entirely separate build that I will get into later and showcase. Fierce Loyalty I would not recommend unless you are using pets again, and not only that, you have a ton of life regeneration. If you do not, it's really rather pointless, it will not save them. Raven Justice really is not enough to shave off cooldowns and return mana until you have, number one, you're killing enemies at a very brisk pace, and you have a much larger radius than 8 yards. It does expand with mods that increase your gold pickup radius, which is very nice, and I don't know how quickly it ramps up exactly. I haven't really ever had items that give me a substantial amount of gold pickup radius, so I'd have to experiment with that later. But to start, 8 yards is really basically you have to be sitting on them in order to get that return. So I would not recommend it until you have a much greater range. Tribal Rites can be very useful using Big Bad Voodoo and Rain Dance. But to start, to just level, I would recommend Jungle Fortitude and Spiritual Attunement. And then as time goes on, depending on your mana situation, you can go with Blood Ritual. Pierce the Veil is a really good choice. Spirit Vessel for bosses, or hard champion packs or something. Rush of Essence if you're using Haunt. Vision Quest as a build I'll get into later. Raven Justice might work eventually if you have a big gold pickup radius, and Tribal Rites is an option if you really are relying on long cooldowns. But essentially what you do is you attack enemies with Rain of Toads until you run out of mana. Then you regenerate it with either Poison Dart and Spine Dart, Corpse Spiders and Widowmaker Spiders, or Haunt and Draining Spirit. There are other options for returning mana, but none of them seem to compare to those 3 options in my play experience, so I'm not really going to talk about them. Beyond that, you want Soul Harvest all the time to give you a substantial amount of intelligence. A 5-stack Soul Harvest will essentially double your DPS at any given time. It's one of the most powerful buffs in the entire game. Really, really, really strong. How you spec it is up to you. In the early game, I used Soul Harvest to give me a bit more mana when I used it to help me on mana return when I didn't have much. Throughout the vast majority of the game, though, I used it with Siphon to use it as another defensive cooldown. It's not to say that you need to do it that way, but that's how I used it. Certainly, reducing movement speed can be helpful, though it's very short duration and there are better slows. That being Grasp of the Dead. Where is it? There it is. And then Soul to Waste can be nice just to help with uptime if you are having trouble getting 5 stacks frequently, and so you don't have to worry about it so much. The best optimized option in terms of damage is absolutely Vengeful Spirit, making those enemies that you got the buff from take, and others, you know, it caps at 5, but you can get more than 5 targets in the radius of the PBAOE, the point blank area of effect, gaining, just debuffing them to take another 70% weapon damage as physical is extremely powerful. It's a ton of damage. I usually don't use it. I usually go with Siphon for more health just because of how hard it is to survive in late Hell and in Inferno, but definitely a good option. But you also unlock Vengeful Spirit very late in the game, so more than likely I used Swallow Your Soul for a while until I unlocked Siphon, then used that through most of my leveling experience. Then, really recommend Spirit Walk. It's incredibly useful. If you don't use it, you will die. To be honest, it is so incredibly powerful. It's one of the most powerful escape abilities in the game, and it can be used for so much more than that. For one thing, it is a short cooldown. Basically, you use it, I can just show it to you. You use it, you turn invisible, you leave behind this body decoy thing, you move quickly, and you're essentially immune to damage. It can break before its 2 seconds are up if they do enough damage to the decoy, but very, very powerful. And with this build in particular, it allows you 2 seconds of invulnerability to channel and to do a tremendous amount of damage. This ability is all about bursting down enemies way faster than they can kill you. So those 2 seconds of invulnerability, just the uptime, needed in Hell and in Inferno to actually kill things is it's so hard because you have to constantly avoid projectiles and enemies and what have you. So I frequently will use that just to get uptime, and I will demonstrate that. But in terms of your rune for Spirit Walk, that depends. I use Jaunt for a good portion of the game just because another second is very useful. I'd use Honored Guest for a good portion of the game when mana was a problem. Umbral Shock I used in a separate build, not for this build. Severance really seems not to be very good. It encourages you to run into enemies, and you're going to pretty much end inside enemies. It's just, I don't really see the use. Once I unlock that, you unlock Healing Journey very late in the game. I use it until the end of the game, turning Spirit Walk not only into a great survivability option in terms of movement, just going through enemies to other sides of rooms if you're stuck in a corner or stuck in a choke point or something, and just using it for uptime. It also heals you for 14% health over 2 seconds, which is incredibly powerful. So that's what I would recommend eventually, but to start, certainly Jaunt and Honored Guests are good options for this build. This is the keystone to this build. This is why it is the Rainman build. Rain Dance and Big Bad Voodoo is incredibly powerful. It gives you infinite mana while you use it, and not only that, it increases movement speed, and it increases attack speed so that you channel and tick even faster to do more damage. It does have a prohibitive cooldown, but even with the cooldown, I found that I could use it at just about every champion pack, every unique pack, every boss, and if it wasn't up, I generally would just survive for a while until it was up, and then burst them down. It's an incredibly powerful cooldown. I cannot stress that enough, and it's really one of the keystones of this build. And I'll demonstrate it. Running in and buffing, then maybe running out with Spirit Walk, then just popping Big Bad Voodoo and Fetish Army, and I'll get into Fetish Army in a second, and then just spamming Plague of Toads and killing everything instantly with infinite mana, not a worry, and then afterwards you can just get it back with Poison Dart and your natural mana regen. Fetish Army is used as some supplemental damage, and in addition to that, it gives you very important uptime. Enemies will attack Fetish Army and not attack you. Very important on Hell and on Inferno, and also even Nightmare. Just time spent attacking and not running away when you are solo especially is very important, but even when grouped, time spent that enemies are not attacking your party members is still very, very useful. Now, leveling up doesn't really matter. Fetish Army I used for a very long time. It turns it into an incredibly powerful damage cooldown as well, because every single fetish deals a tremendous amount of weapon damage as physical to any nearby enemy as it's summoned. However, that forces you to basically use it as a PBAOE, because they need to actually be in the radius of the PBAOE attack when they're summoned in order to actually take the damage, so it makes it a lot riskier to use later. Devoted Following can be useful to reduce it down to 90 seconds, but I wouldn't really recommend it for this build because it doesn't really make them do any more damage, and it is helpful to use Legion of Daggers to make them do more damage, to use Tiki Torches to make them do more damage, and to again, just Headhunters to make them do some supplemental damage. And another reason why I say that is because Big Bad Voodoo is not going to have 90-second cooldown, and you basically always want to blow these two cooldowns at the exact same time. Otherwise, I would totally recommend going with Devoted Following just for more uptime on enemies, but for this build in particular, not really what I would do, because you want to blow these things simultaneously. You really do not want to blow them independently. You want to just blow up enemies with both of the cooldowns. So for the vast majority of the game, I used Fetish Army. I eventually did try out Legion of Daggers and Tiki Torches, and I finally settled on Headhunters just because Fetish Army turned out to be pretty risky to use. Though honestly, in retrospect, it's probably the best choice just because of how much damage it does. To be honest, I just kind of got bored of using it through the entirety of the game because you unlock it really, really early. So really, that's probably your best choice, and is what I would ultimately recommend. So for leveling up, Plague of Toads with Rain of Toads, Spine Dart, or I would recommend Widow Spiders. I might just demonstrate both of them, we'll see. Then Soul Harvest with Siphon, and Spirit Walk with not Healing Journey. Leveling up, you would probably have just Honored Guest most of the time. Big Bad Voodoo with Rain Dance, once you unlock it, and Fetish Army with Fetish Ambush. And then Jungle Fortitude, Spiritual Attunement, and then your mileage may vary on the last one. I already really talked about that. For now, I think I will just use Blood Ritual and just stack both of these together for the most mana return that I can get. Okay, so this is one variation of the build. I will go into another one. There are a few variations. It's an interesting build. It's a flexible build. So just to give you an idea, and this is Inferno, by the way. We are playing on Inferno. I need to just find some enemies. Enemies. There we go. Okay, so just the basic spamming. And you can see how much damage Rain of Toads does even on Inferno. Run away. And I, with these two passives, have infinite mana right now, along with my mana regeneration. So I don't even need Big Bad Voodoo. Through the vast majority of the game, though, I did. I didn't have, you know, level 60 stuff, and I did. So it's still very, very useful. It does help that these enemies are slow, and it keeps them in the radius of the Rain of Toads. It does have a small radius. So that's the basic attack. You can couple that with Blow Dart to regenerate mana further. I can buff up and kill them even faster. You can see it ticks very, very quickly. Finish them off. I highly recommend even just having a secondary skill to finish enemies off when you can't channel, when you need to move frequently. Stuff like that. And then finally, hopefully I can find a large pack of enemies. Usually there are some big ones over here. Here we go. We can blow Fetish Army. Do a ton of damage there. Big Bad Voodoo. And just burst these guys down without really having to worry about anything. It's a really powerful build. Buff up. Personally, I think it's really the most powerful build you can have on a Witch Doctor in terms of just straight up damage. But, could be wrong. Some of you guys might have way better ideas than I do. I generally burn my cooldowns on high level, you know, on unique packs, champion packs, and just really big mobs of enemies. Now, another thing you can do is these guys, you know, are attacking me, so I can use Spirit Walk just in the middle of them to give me some uptime and not worry about them, and to just kind of juke their attacks. Just avoid and dodge their attacks, essentially. So again, I avoided her Barf attack, ran in on her, and started doing damage, and I'll heal up with my buff. Move back a bit. And that's basically that. So that is the Rain of Toads version of the build. There are some other options you can employ, and I will show them thusly. So Plague of Toads, that's Plague of Toads. Later on in the game, you can unlock Firebats, and you can use Firebats instead. It's another channel, it's essentially an Inferno. Now, Firebats is much more expensive than Rain of Toads. Rain of Toads, let's compare, is just 34 mana per tick, does 130% weapon damage as poison to enemies in the area over 2 seconds, and it ticks very frequently, whereas Firebats is 122 mana per tick, doing 150% weapon damage. So Firebats costs way more mana, but it does do more damage per second. Unlike Rain of Toads, though, it is a much shorter ranged ability. Rain of Toads rains them down from where you are, from the sky. Firebats requires you to move in. Now, as far as Firebats goes, as to which evolution you should use, well, I wouldn't recommend Dire Bats, because when you use Dire Bats, it's no longer an Inferno ability, so that kind of is no longer in the spirit of the build. Certainly, Vampiric Bats gaining damage returned as life is nice, but I think there are better choices. Plague Bats basically turns it kind of like into Rain of Toads in terms of it's now going to do poison damage, and it's going to do far more damage per tick, and it's still an Inferno ability, so that's an interesting choice. Hungry Bats it's still a channeled ability, it's just kind of a different sort of channeled ability. I will showcase each of these runes as well. And then Cloud of Bats turns it into a PB AoE that is channeled. So first, let's do Plague Bats. That's more of like the traditional sort of Inferno ability. I will now use Widowmaker Spiders instead of the Blow Dart, and everything else I think is going to stay the same. I'm not going to change up runes at all. I just want to maintain mana. Now I need to wait for these things to come off cooldown, so let us get past that. Okay, so essentially this build is the same. We're just using a different primary attack. So, and a means of regenerating mana. So as you can see, a lot more mana intensive, but it does do more damage, and it's also a typical Inferno, like the Sorceress from Diablo 2. Very short range. Far more dangerous, though, because it's very short range, and it's really not killing these guys fast enough for my taste, because I'm so close as well. But let us try it out some more. I personally do not prefer... I really prefer Rain of Toads, or another ability that I'll get into later. It's certainly effective, it's just dangerous, and it doesn't do a lot more damage. It ticks slower for how much mana it costs, but to show you some improved mana regen using Widowmaker Spires. And some supplemental damage as well. I mean, I can even just kill these guys with Widowmaker Spiders if I need, and I can just throw some bases, and I can just continue moving and getting back mana. That's why I prefer Widowmaker Spiders as my go-to mana return ability, or just Draining Haunt. Unfortunately, Draining Haunt does require you to basically use a passive in order to use it, so that is a sacrifice. I generally just use Widowmaker Spiders through the vast majority of the game. My mana return ability. Okay, let's see if we can find one more decent pack and try to burst them down. Hopefully more than just 3 people. Okay, here we go. A bunch of guys. Get my buff in a second. So, damage is buffed up. As you can see, though, so close. I mean, I'm just so close to these guys. So let's burn our cooldowns to get some uptime and see the difference when they're not actively attacking me. Ow. He blew up. I always forget about that, how much damage that does on Inferno. Heal up with Spirit Walk. And just the joy of uptime with these fetishes, making it so that these enemies do not attack me, they are attacking the fetishes. You see how useful it is to have uptime. But this build is not... I do not have infinite mana, unlike with Reign of Toads. Personally, I think Reign of Toads is the far more effective option. I don't actually need to return mana if I don't want to. This is an example of using Spirit Walk to just run into enemies and burst them down in that 2-second window. Those guys would have killed me in those 2 seconds if I had not done that. They do that much damage. So let us finish off using it, and see how short the range is too on this ability. Let's buff up again. Okay, now let's run away and change it to a different evolution. Let's instead use Firebats with Hungry Bats. Hungry Bats is a lot different from the traditional Firebats. And just the base Firebats ability, by the way, is just like this, the Inferno that you saw, short-range cone. It's just red instead of green, essentially. And it does less damage, obviously. And it does it as fire damage rather than as poison damage. So now we'll use Hungry Bats. Again, need to wait for it to come off cooldown, though. The cooldown, I believe, is quite a bit longer on Inferno when switching abilities, so we'll just skip through that, through the magic of editing. So here we go. We now are using Hungry Bats. As you can see, it does a lot of damage for the same mana cost, and it's still kind of, you know, it's a channeled Rain Death Upon Them ability. You send out heat-seeking bats, essentially, and it can be quite effective. It's definitely an option. It's definitely competitive with Reign of Toads. Absolutely. Even with the increased mana cost, I would say it's competitive. So now, big pack here. I'm going to buff up. I'm going to blow my cooldowns. Huge pack here, in fact. I killed all those guys that were charging on me instantly with the fetishes, and I now have infinite mana while I channel this. I do need to stay within the ring. I'm now going to use the Spirit Walk as a means of getting more uptime again. Buff up. Okay, so now that's over, unfortunately. No more fun there, no more infinite mana. But able to do a lot of damage, able to get uptime for a good period of time. Otherwise, I would have had significantly more trouble dealing with this pack. And now I just need to play the kiting game. Now, unfortunately, this thing does tick kind of slow when it sends out the bats. It takes a while for the bats to reach them, so it's not as bursty as Reign of Toads. I would say it's competitive, but I would say Reign of Toads is probably ultimately stronger in how it ticks. But unlike Reign of Toads, these things seek out enemies, whereas Reign of Toads, you have to kind of follow them along with the rain, make sure it's still constantly hitting them. If nothing else, so it's also fire damage, and it's just different. It's different, it's fun, it's another option that you can employ. And just change things up a bit. But it is much more mana intensive, and you do not have infinite mana when using it, even with the double passives for mana conservation. So that is important to know. It is fun, though. It is definitely fun. Note that my mana regeneration is a lot better because of my weapon, because of the plus 10 to mana regeneration in addition to the passives. So the Rainman build is really just all about raining death down upon your enemies in whatever form, be it poison, be it fire, and then making use of Big Bad Voodoo and Fetish Army for uptime. You can also use the Gargantuan, but I prefer Fetish Army. and just use it as one big cooldown. The Gargantuan dies really easily in Hell and in Inferno, and the zombie dogs just die instantly. The mongrels die instantly. I would absolutely not sacrifice Soul Harvest. Let's use my passive again, or my cooldowns again. See, they've come off cooldown. It does take a long time to kill enemies in Inferno anyway, so you're going to be able to use these cooldowns a lot more frequently than you think. I just got a 12,000 crit right there. You would be surprised. As you can see, it takes down single targets really, really quick. And it has a really nice range, really fun ability, really powerful. And I'm really not having mana trouble with all my mana regen. It's regenerating quick enough when I run away. Oh god. I don't know if I'll actually be able to kill these guys. They're really fast. They're vampiric. They're frozen. They're jailer, and they're molten. There's absolutely no way. I'm going to try to just get away, and I might have to just save and exit. I don't even have my cooldowns right now. I just entered Inferno. I am not geared or anything. The fact that they're Empiric, there's no way, I don't think, with my current ability that I'll actually be able to damage them without cooldowns. So we are going to resume game in a second. Okay, so I had to just leave the game. There was no way I was going to be able to kill those guys. I just entered Inferno. I should mention that this build is perfectly capable of dealing with uniques and champions and bosses. I used this build, or variations of it, throughout basically all of Hell and a good portion of Nightmare. So it does work. Now, Inferno, I believe it can work as well when you have the proper gear to support it. So now I'm going to use Firebats with the Cloud of Bats evolution, 195% weapon damage, 122 mana, same amount of mana. And it also has a stacking buff that after 5 seconds it'll do an additional 50% maximum damage. Now, unfortunately, it actually does significantly less damage, though, just looking at the coefficients, than the Hungry Bats rune. However, it does tick faster. At least I believe it does. I haven't really used it very much. So I just use Spirit Walk to get a little uptime on them. Just a couple seconds of uptime. Let's blow our passives to give me even more uptime. Wait for them to kind of congregate. Buff up. And note how quickly it kills them. He's going to explode. A bunch of damage. It does do a tremendous amount of damage. It does tick very, very quickly, but it has a very, very short range. Honestly, I don't think this would work. It's certainly an Inferno. For the earlier parts of the game, maybe, but this is also the final evolution. The final rune. I keep calling it evolution because of all the Mass Effect 3 I've been playing. The final rune of the ability. I don't remember exactly when I got it, but I can guarantee you, being in the 6th rune of an ability, I got it very late game. So I really don't see this, just looking at the radius, being viable. Certainly an Inferno. You do not want to be that close to enemies in Inferno, at least not for long periods of time, and this is a channel, so you need to be for long periods of time, essentially. Now, when you're using Fetish Army or something, or they're being distracted by other players, certainly, then it becomes viable, but by yourself, it just seems to be extremely risky. Unless you can somehow kill everybody in the 2 seconds you get when you're using Spirit Walk. Otherwise, and yeah, see, I just died. Otherwise, it's really just not going to happen, barring using Fetish Army for a brief distraction. But that's not sustainable. That's once every 2 minutes. That's not sustainable. Its radius, it does do good damage, it ticks very quickly, but its radius is simply too small, and it's too risky in late game in Hell and in Inferno. Now, with party members, it could be a different story, because if they're not attacking you, you can burst them down very, very quickly. It still would be a very risky build, because you're going to have to be close, but yeah, just doesn't seem to be practical, unless you can somehow kill everybody in 2 seconds of immunity from Spirit Walk, and you're okay only attacking enemies every 15 seconds, or every 2 minutes with Fetish Army, or what have you. So that's, I think, enough of that ability. I am now going to talk about another ability. Personally, I think this is probably the strongest evolution of the power, and that is Zombie Charger plus Zombie Bears. This is the strongest attack that I have seen on this class. It does an ungodly amount of damage very, very quickly. It is mana intensive, costing 140 mana per second. There's 236% weapon damage as poison to enemies in the area per bear. It sends out a lot of bears very, very quickly. So I'm going to use Zombie Charger, and I'm going to, instead of using Corpse Spiders, use Haunt with Draining Spirit, which is, both of these abilities are unlocked very, very late in the game. You will, I believe, only get them in Hell. Around Act 2, I would say. Something like that. So now we need to wait for these things to come off cooldown, so I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so we are now using zombie bears and haunt with a mana return mechanic. Oh, and I actually forgot, unfortunately. If you're going to use haunt, I highly recommend you use Rush of Essence in order to give you a much better return for your mana. Now we need to wait for that. Alright. Okay, so we can finally start. Find some enemies. And show you guys the awesome power that is zombie bears. Okay, so we can just start out by dotting these guys for why not. Not really necessary, though. Because they're dead. Instantly. Zombie bears does a tremendous amount of damage. Essentially, you can do 100,000 damage in just a handful of seconds with this ability, if all the bears hit their targets. Now, the limitation is it is a shorter range cone. The bears cannot cross gaps. For example, if I send them into these trees, they just blow up on the trees, and this one's going out that way. So if you have obstacles in front of you, like walls from wallers or something, or just trying to use it through a narrow doorway, a narrow choke point, can not work at times. You are. Oh, sweet. Beautiful. Just a second. This might be a good example, or maybe not. So here's a huge pack of guys. As you can see, I'm just liquidating them, and I do have infinite mana when using my cooldowns. So there goes that entire pack. I'm getting near the edge of my thing, though, so now I'm going to try to regenerate mana with Haunt. Apologies if I'm no longer coherent. These are a champion pack, and this is freaking Inferno, which makes things a bit difficult. So my mana is back. Use zombie bears. These guys are instantly dead. Incredibly powerful ability. This combination pretty much single-handedly got me through hell. This is what I used to get through hell. I didn't use it on Diablo or bosses because it's too mana intensive and it requires you to stand still for too long. But against regular packs of guys, incredibly powerful. Just using it with the cooldowns, it's incredibly powerful. What are these guys? Frozen, flex damage, fast, extra health. This might actually be doable. So now to demonstrate it on another pack. This ability is fairly dangerous to use, unlike Plague of Toads or Reign of Toads, whatever it's called. Just like with Firebats, you do need to be very close to enemies, but it does do a tremendous amount of damage very, very quickly over a very large radius. So essentially, I spent most of hell just instantly killing everybody, very glass cannon build, in order to survive and to just brute force my way through it. With enough survivability, though, I feel like it can work in Inferno, but I don't know. Inferno is really hard. And I've just started it. Even just these two little guys did that much damage to me. So let's use this on one more pack or so, just to show you, again, a demonstration of how much damage it could theoretically do. Okay, big pack here. Let's run in. Let's buff up. Let's use Fetish Army. And then just blow them up instantly. Keeping in mind that the fat guys have like 60,000 health, so I just did 60,000 damage that quickly, blowing those cooldown. And I didn't, again, really even need to. I'm just doing it because it's glorious. But Zombie Bears definitely has its limitations. It's very mana intensive. As I said, you can hit walls and stuff with it. You can't really use it through doorways, which sucks because that you really want to fight through doorways in Diablo, because instead of facing 10 guys surrounding you, you're facing one in front of you, which makes things a lot easier a lot of the time.
What drives the monsters here to attack us? Do they not
does more damage than any other ability that I've seen on the Witch Doctor. I've used them all. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to be the highest damage ability that he has over the shortest period of time. You can do hundreds of thousands of damage very quickly. So now let's use this. Try to get some uptime using Spirit Walk just for a couple seconds. That's all I really need to kill these guys. This crit for 21,000 on just a single bear once again. I mean, you can see the potential here. The high enough crit chance, I would be doing 1,000,000 damage in just a few seconds. So now to return some mana just to kite these guys away. Blow them up. Blow them up. And that's that. Run back to whoever was left. That's basically it. Zombie Bears. The Zombie Bear version of the Rainman build. It also covers your back, by the way. If enemies are behind you, because of the nature of the bears, how they spawn, It will kill enemies behind you as well as in front of you, just basically all around you. It's almost a very large PBAOE. It's kind of a cross between a PBAOE and a cone. It's like a cone PBAOE. It's kind of odd. Normally PBAOEs are circular, generally speaking. But you can see the potential here, I'm sure. Alright, I think that is it for this version of the build. Let us try one last version of the build. One last alternative. So here is yet another variation of this build. This build forgoes Spiritual Attunement and whatever else I had, and I go with Pierce the Veil. All damage is increased by 20%, plus mana costs are increased by 30%, and then Vision Quest. This is a Vision Quest Rainman build. Vision Quest being the key here, along with just the regular build. So, I no longer have any other damaging abilities but Zombie Charger. I'm using Hex for healing and hedge magic, and because it's on a decently long cooldown, 15 seconds. Basically what you do is Vision Quest will increase my mana regeneration by 300% when 4 or more skills are on cooldown. So I get Big Bad Voodoo, Fetish Army, Hex, and, say, Spirit Walk, all on cooldown, and then I have enough mana to just kind of perpetually use Zombie Charger or Firebats. I wouldn't really use this with Rain of Toads because it already has a pretty cheap mana cost. So let's see how this goes. Now, one issue with this build is it encourages you to just blow Big Bad Voodoo and Fetish Army whenever, which is unfortunate because they're incredibly powerful cooldowns and allow you to really just wreck enemies, especially champion packs or what have you. So buff up. Let's get... And you can see my mana regeneration even outside of Big Bad Voodoo now. Just as long as I have these on cooldown, I have one of these on cooldown, preferably this, and then Hex perpetually on cooldown, I can get incredible mana regeneration. So, run in, get out Hex, start spamming. And personally, I feel like this build is a totally viable alternative. Again, its biggest issue is that you no longer really have these two abilities to use whenever you want. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of the game, you know, spend a lot of time with really poor mana regeneration. When you're waiting for an opportunity to use these cooldowns. So granted, you won't have to wait long on Inferno or on Hell. You will find champion packs and unique packs quite frequently. You can die now. Thank you. But it's still something to keep in mind. It's why I ultimately decided against using this in Hell, just because I didn't like not having those cooldowns when I really wanted to burst down something difficult. So one last time. Buff up. Get some uptime with Spirit Walk. I mean, you can see how quickly I can regenerate my mana outside of combat. Spirit Walk, buff up, destroy everything. Let's see, with all these things on cooldown, how long it takes me to actually run out of mana, how many channels I can get.
Needs more time.
Quite a few. Channel it for quite a long time, and I actually just... something came off of cooldown. That's why it stopped really working. Let's keep trying, just for the sake of comparison. I think this is a totally viable build. It's just really player choice, and whether or not you like to be more bursty with these cooldowns, or whether or not you prefer just to have lots of mana regeneration pretty much all the time. Like, I'm using this just on one target, just so that they come off of cooldown, or rather go on cooldown. So now I have 4 things on cooldown. Good number of attacks, and then already it's just about all the way back. So that is the Vision Rainman build, essentially. The Vision Quest Rainman build. There is one final thing I would like to mention that I have not talked about. This works particularly well with the Reign of Toads style of build, and that is to go with another very appropriate ability for the build, Grasp of the Dead, spec for Reign of Corpses, for not only a very powerful snare effect, but a nice bit of supplemental damage over a very large radius. So let's try that out as our last little demonstration. I will use Pierce the Veil because this ability is pretty cheap. I will not use Vision Quest anymore. I will use just probably Spiritual Attunement to help me with mana regeneration, because this is a rather expensive ability to use every 8 seconds, so I don't know if my mana regen is going to be quite up to snuff. We will see, though I do need to wait for these things to go off of cooldown. So I will be back in just a second. So again, Reign of Toads plus Rain of Corpses. So supplemental damage. I don't really need any mana return mechanic anymore. With Rain of Toads, I have pretty much infinite mana. Not quite, but pretty much. Now, that wasn't always the case, though. Something I should stress. When leveling, Big Bad Voodoo and Rain Dance was very important for burst. It's still useful just for a faster channel on your Rain of Toads. Though I didn't really use Rain of Toads in the late game, I used the Rainman build with zombie bears. Was how I finished off Hell. Just because of its massive amount of damage that it does. Okay, so let us use Rain of Corpses. As you can see, it rains down corpses. The rain affects the entire screen pretty much. The snare is only just a little patch of ground you see there. It's basically just some supplemental damage, really. And it's, I think, incredibly amusing to have corpses rain down upon enemies' heads. Let's find some more. Personally, I really think you're probably better off if you really wanted to use this exact build I'm using now. In the very late game, you could probably substitute just for Rain of Toads. For the other things I talked about, I would not substitute Big Bad Voodoo for anything, but for this particular build, it doesn't strictly need it, so you could definitely use something else. You could use Gargantuan if you wanted to, or just a CC ability like Horrify or Confuse or something, or just whatever you want. And Grasp of the Dead probably isn't really worthwhile, at least not in large open spaces like this. In doorways, when you can really have a choke point and snare people, it can be more useful. The damage on Rain of Corpses isn't really quite enough to make it worthwhile to use, I would say, but it's really thematic and amusing, so if you want to use it, go for it. You'd probably be better off, though, with Hex and just Hedge Magic for the extra supplemental healing, which I'm definitely missing right now. These guys are wrecking me. I gotcha. I gotcha! I think this demonstration is about done, though. As there's like one more guy over here. There happens to be exactly one more guy. Alright guys, that's it. That is the Rainman build. I hope this helped you guys out there that are interested in stuff like this. If you're struggling beating Hell or something, I beat it basically using a variation of this build. I beat pretty much the whole game using some variation of this build. Nightmare was Plague of Toads, Hell was Zombie Bears, and then just variations of the different things, but so I know it works. Whether or not it works really well in Inferno, I mean, I can kill people, but whether or not it's the most optimal choice, I don't know. I haven't beaten Inferno yet. We will see. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Diablo 3 stuff. And please leave comments and feedback, and sub if you'd like to see more Diablo 3. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and if it helped you, if you thought it was educational. And have a good one.